Good morning. Thank you for joining this end of week webinar sponsored by or hosted by the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce. I'm Kim Smythe, President and CEO of the Chamber. And my guests today are Graham Truax from Innovation Island and Calum Mathews from Tourism Nanaimo, Tourism Vancouver Island. I want to start this morning by acknowledging that a moment of silence is being observed across Canada for the victims and families of our neighbors in Nova Scotia. And we debated whether we should start late or start on time. We've decided to start on time, but make that acknowledgement and observe and pay respects in your own way during this day and the weekend. So thanks very much. We've been hosting these webinars for the past several weeks, talking to government leaders mostly, and now we're shifting over to speak with business leaders who have programs that they're introducing to our community. Graham at Innovation Island's program is the DER3 program, and Calum is the Tourism Resiliency program. And I'm going to start with Calum. And Calum, if you want to just give us maybe a few minutes, an overview of the resiliency program.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks so much for having me on. Just doing a quick screen share here. Hopefully that's working with a couple bullet points in a slide deck. I'm sure if I could see everyone's faces on the other end, there'd be lots of familiar ones. Still kind of getting used to this new Zoom format, but love that the Chamber is taking the opportunity to try to create, virtual forums for us all to connect. So, a huge thanks to you and your team, Kim. Just a reminder, Tourism Vancouver Island, we're a nonprofit industry-led organization, and our board of directors is made up of a variety of key tourism industry stakeholders, from wildlife viewing to food tourism. We have representation from community destination marketing organizations, ski resorts, transportation, accommodation, you name it. So we like to think that we have a good sense of the challenges that businesses are facing right now, and also like to think that we're developing programs in a way that we can really cater to the realities on the ground. Our role in the system has obviously changed, like many organizations. We knew that in order to really provide meaningful services to tourism businesses, we had to adapt. So we focused on business intelligence gathering. So we've had a survey of about 500 businesses rolling every week, and we report out on that weekly to Minister Lisa Bear with Tourism Arts Culture. We've launched significant advocacy efforts to try to support businesses and the needs of businesses. We're developing marketing recovery plans, and this new tourism resiliency program falls in the business recovery side of things. So as I mentioned, we've been doing some intelligence surveying, and I just wanted to touch on this because it helps to frame our program. What we found over our weekly surveys is that about 53% of businesses in the tourism sector that we surveyed are temporarily closed. 36 have reduced hours and services. About 80% of reservations on the books have been canceled, and that number continues to increase. And we're seeing cancellations reported well into 2021. And for a lot of businesses that rely on long haul and international travel, we know that the impacts of this are going to be felt at least until 2022. A couple other key findings I wanted to share off the top. About 50% of the businesses we surveyed this week don't have the cash flow to pay their April bills. 70% of businesses have applied for or accessed federal provincial relief programs, and 90% of those businesses report that they've been effective to some degree. So from my perspective, that is a little bit of the good news, in that number of businesses accessing programs has increased dramatically in the last couple of weeks. And with only 10% finding these programs not so effective or not at all effective, I think that that's a positive indication. But we know that more work is needed and more support is needed. In particular, businesses have been telling us that they need Tourism Vancouver Island and our partners to advocate on their behalf to government. We need to have more streamlined communications, so there's this easy to understand information about the programs that are available and how to access them. And we also have heard that businesses need support with pathfinding services and access to expert advice. So that leads us to the Vancouver Coastal Tourism Resiliency Program. Really important, I mentioned Island Coastal Economic Trust. This wouldn't be possible without the leadership of their CEO, Lynn Robert, and their board of directors and regional advisory committees. They, as an organization, were fast to understand the impact that this would have on businesses and in the tourism sector, and they worked hand in hand with us to develop this program. So it's as much Iced Tea's as it is ours. We co-created it together, so a huge thanks to Iced Tea. This is just a really short overview of the program, but really what we're trying to do is provide long-term business support, deliver meaningful one-on-one kind of hands-on support to businesses as they navigate the impact of COVID-19 on their operations. And it's really about relief, access to programs that are available, adaptation to our kind of new normal that we're in right now, and then working towards more long-term resiliency. And we really do have a long-term lens on this program. There's two main components that I'll touch on today. The first is client care. The program advisors it's a group of about 10 individuals we have working with us right now who are all, have been working in the tourism industry for a significant period of time and have strong backgrounds. And they're matched with businesses and provide them with hands-on guidance throughout the entire journey that a business has in this program. So there's a clear go-to person for every business. The focus is on triaging and conducting a needs assessment, co-creating a plan that will help guide the business's involvement in the program. We will provide them with access to kind of tactical instructional documents that can help them to adapt their business. And perhaps most importantly, access to subject matter experts in HR, finance, and reputation management and public relations right now. And we're currently working to build that group of experts out with a focus in particular on business adaptation and recovery strategies as well in the longer term. The final kind of pillar of the program is a digital resource hub where we have typically about weekly webinars, information bulletins posted, and also additional resources available to businesses. Right now, the program has a 6-month minimum lens, and we're working really hard behind the scenes to try to extend that. To be frank, I think that this program needs to be available for at least a full calendar year to be able to support, in particular, that adaptation and resiliency piece. We have over 200 businesses registered from Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast. And a really exciting piece of news is that it's soon to be announced officially, but the program's going to be going province-wide. So what we've been able to do is share the learnings that we've developed and the resources that we've had through Iced Tea's support and be able to basically share documents and templates to help get the program going across the province. And we're working in partnership with our regional destination management organization counterparts and also Vancouver Coastal Mountains through Destination BC. Just, again, wanted to recognize some of our partners, in particular, Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, Island Coastal Economic Trust. And, encourage everyone to go to tourismresiliency.ca. That website now reflects the provincial scope of the program. And there's a tab to access Vancouver Island and Sunshine Coast specific content and to register. So thanks a lot, Kim. There's a little bit of an overview.
Thanks very much, Calum. Just out of curiosity here, is Iced Tea involved in the province-wide rollout as well?
Yeah, Iced Tea is in that the other regional trusts have not been, they're not supporting financially this program being launched in the other regions. So what Iced Tea has been able to do, which is really great, is allow us to share the, for example, the communications plans, the kind of all the internal documents that we're using to really power the system or power the program have been, kind of picked up and shared across the province. So we're able to find quite a few efficiencies, but the other regions are working with their partners now to try to find additional funding. But that, the funding that we have is from Iced Tea is strictly going towards implementing the program and developing tools for Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast.
And who exactly is eligible to register? Is it just tourism businesses?
Yeah, so if you're a registered stakeholder of Tourism Vancouver Island, you're eligible to participate. It's on tourismvi.ca is the stakeholder registration page. It's really simple. First, you can check to see if you're already registered, because oftentimes businesses are. And then the eligibility checklist is quite simple. The only exception to that would be businesses on the Sunshine Coast, where they wouldn't typically be a Tourism Vancouver Island stakeholder, but we're working in partnership with Sunshine Coast Tourism to deliver the program on the Sunshine Coast. So they're providing us with kind of access to their stakeholders lists.
And is there any cost to participate, any registration fees or anything?
Good question. Absolutely no cost to participate. The only thing that I'll mention is that in terms of access to our panel of experts, every business will get about an hour or two of time with that expert to wrestle with, maybe it's cash flow forecasting with a finance expert, or looking at return to work policy on the HR side. But obviously the program can't support, the development of new employment agreements for 20 different staff positions. So at a certain point, there might have to be a handoff between the services we can provide in this program and things that go beyond what we're able to do. But we're kind of looking at that on a case-by-case basis.
And applicants to this point in time, heavy stream, light?
Yeah, so we're pretty excited. We've got over 200 registered and participating in the program. So for us, the challenge that our team's hard at work behind the scenes on is kind of triaging the needs of businesses. Some folks are in a fairly, I don't want to use the word comfortable position, but they're in a bit of a holding pattern, whereas others have really immediate needs. So we're able to kind of determine who needs what and what the priority is there. But we certainly have capacity for 200 in the program, and we're kind of watching those registrations day by day, and we'll add a little bit more depth to the team and some additional capacity if those numbers continue to increase.
Excellent, great. Thanks very much, Calum. I'll come back to you with some further questions later. I'd like to shift over and have Graham give a similar introduction to the DER3 program.
Thank you very much, Kim, and for queuing all of this up, I think, behind the scenes with your team. Calum, great presentation. Just briefly, Innovation Island is also a nonprofit industry association. I think most of you know this, but we work under a Crown corporation called Innovate BC. Innovate BC has for decades now delivered technology and innovation-based services and programs across the province, and we're one of their service providers. Also want to thank for sure Island Coast Economic Trust. ICE-T has been behind our program as well. There are some similarities between the tourism program and the program that I'm going to describe here for some obvious reasons. But for what we're doing, first and foremost, the Digital Economy Response Program is really designed to help businesses that want to either enter into or expand within the digital economy. So we used to call the digital economy, the internet economy, and that was just getting online. But really right now we're in a time where digital platforms and services and products, they touch everything. They're a part of our business, big or small. And so we now call that the digital economy. Because this audience is very business centered, I'm going to talk about the one main component of the project, which is onboarding businesses to do evaluations with respect to what they might need to do to enter or expand in the digital economy. And this program is open to the same service area, everything past the Malahat to the Gulf Islands, south and north, and the Sunshine Coast. Businesses that are considering some of these things may have some back office work to do. They might need to put together a more comprehensive CRM system to list and identify their customers and their needs. That's a bit of a prep before you might want to expand what you've done with your website, for instance. We know that some businesses are doing transactions and have e-commerce platforms or services, and others haven't. We know that there's a difference between companies that have maybe a few dozen SKUs versus perhaps a few thousand. So the needs are quite wide-ranging at this point in time, but we have years of experience in this area, and the nature of the program, which I'll do a screen share in a second, is designed to tackle pretty large and serious problems, as well as quickly facilitate smaller challenges that may help folks just get busy in a hurry. Before I get to the screen share, I think we all know and are grappling with the fact that there's going to be a few phases before we get back to the new normal. We're in active crisis mode. There's just no doubt about it. We're then going to go into a transition mode, which is going to look interesting and different. And then we're probably going to get into some active recovery mode before we get to the new normal. And when it comes to business and the economics of it, in my strong opinion, we need to consider that there's going to be pretty radical changes with respect to consumer behavior. We are wanting to put systems in place to help businesses get back to business, but are the customers going to show up? And guess what? They might show up in different ways. And so we want to make sure that businesses are taking a serious look at benefiting from digital platforms and services that would allow for a slightly more diverse business model. I think we can associate to local restaurants, some of which were early adopters to services like Skip the Dishes. That was a good call for a lot of those restaurants. And we want to perhaps help other restaurants realize that that's just more than a delivery service. So we have a lot of resources to tackle some of these challenges as we get to hopefully the new normal sooner than later. So I'm just going to do a quick screen share of our landing page here. So you can get to the program from our main website, innovationisland.ca. We just have this big, large button here, and that's the conduit, that's the doorway to the program. So I'll just maximize this for a second. Calum, you have some great pictures. I need to consider some great pictures for backdrops here, but what we're trying to do is make this really straightforward. We are absolutely keeping this real, and so we have 3 access points for people considering the program. First of all, if you're a small, medium-sized business and you need help, just click that big button. Now, the other aspects of the program touch on digital service providers. These are companies within our communities that can help to get stuff done. They've been doing this stuff in some cases for decades. We will assess the needs of businesses one-to-one, and we'll either provide solutions right away to get folks working on things, or we'll start to match them up to the appropriate digital service providers that can really do some serious lifting to tackle perhaps some more complicated challenges. Our third component of this program is very similar to what Calum was describing. We have lists of subject matter experts that are really quite skilled in very particular things. And this could be from advanced sciences to really deep and specific challenges within digital domains and products and services. But it could be artists, graphic designers, folks perhaps that don't have a going concern business, but really know some very specific things. So if you think of the power of this, we're really combining needs that are in our communities to resources to help consider changes to business models or fast adjustments to the challenges that a lot of these folks are facing. And we've only been on for a week now. Calum, you guys had a bit of a head start on us, but we already have over 100 applications in the program as well. And you know, the only real distinction between, you know, the massive businesses and businesses that are tourism, you know, we have just a good working agreement. If companies are tourism related, then we push them to Calum, and Calum's doing the same thing to us. So both of these programs, I think, speak to the heart of the needs that are out there, and I'll be happy to Q&A, you know, from here.
Again, same question I asked Calum. Is there a cost to access the program, Graham?
Yeah, thanks. So off the top, no. This is a service that is provided by, you know, our backing and the backing of ICE-T. But as Calum was referring to, there are some limits to what we can do on the front end. We can do quite a bit on the front end, but if a retailer came to us and said, I have 10,000 SKUs that have to be digitized, that's a bigger job than what we can do ourselves. But if that was a challenge that was presented, we could do some pretty serious assessments of what might need to be done in advance of that job. And then we can also provide a set of recommendations for local service providers that have those skills. So there's a bit of matchmaking that goes on here. It's all done quite equitably and transparently. And we know that the businesses that are in our communities that do this stuff at a professional level are quite active and busy right now. So we can assess these larger needs and make the right fits accordingly.
Okay, so describe the process from when a small business would apply or register. What happens next?
Perfect. Thanks for that. Yeah. So there's an intake form. I'm just going to flip the screen here. There's an intake form that just allows a business to give us some background baseline data. That data goes to one of our project managers who can do some assessments. We then will reach out to each and every business and basically do a get to know you interview sort of process. Once we have all of the information, we take that back to our team and we actively start problem solving. We will create short lists of things that businesses can do right away and slightly longer lists. And at the end of the day, we're going to have what we call a business action plan that businesses can seriously look at using and executing. And as I mentioned, depending on the needs and the opportunities of the businesses, because there are going to be some exciting opportunities, they may be able to just start executing with our assistance, or we may be able to find some pros and professional service providers that will work with, you know, under a contracted basis.
So the businesses that that you're inviting to access or to apply to access the program, are they from any specific field or sector, or is there a propensity for one kind of business over another kind of difference? Is it retail over professional services, let's say, or give us an idea?
Yeah, so right now our data is all over the map. You know, we have examples of everything that you've referred to there, and personally, I think that's how it's going to be. You know, I think we can all consider that every industry, every business sector, there have been some of those businesses that were early adopters to digital platforms and you know, participating actively within the digital economy, and there were lots that didn't. And guess what? The ones that didn't, well, they didn't need to, or maybe they didn't want to, and that's fine. And so we're finding that there are all sorts of business categories, sectors that are now grappling with changes conceivably to their business models. And so some of those businesses are now trying to do in 2 or 3 months what a lot of other businesses have done over many, many years, in some cases a couple of decades. So there's going to be, I think, quite an interesting set of challenges in a very diverse set of business sectors.
If I have signed on as a digital service provider, am I able to charge for my services when you refer an applicant to me? is that a private deal that is struck between me and them, or am I signing on as a DSP and and that I have signed an agreement or made an agreement with you and ICE-T that I will provide X amount of service at no charge, and beyond that, it's this much. Is it measured like that in any way, or how is that call made?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, digital service providers are not contracting with us. They are registering with us and giving us a solid understanding of what they're doing or what they're perhaps prepared to do for some businesses in need. We're finding that a lot of digital service providers have their own programs for certain bits and pieces of things that they're doing pro bono. But when we match a business in need with a digital service provider that can get some pretty serious stuff done, that's a separate relationship between those two entities. And we will only provide advice on some of that process so that it's a fair and equitable exchange between two business entities.
Excellent. Calum, I'll switch back to you for a second. And it's the same question I'm going to ask Graham in a moment is, where do you find the greatest need in terms of what your applicants are asking you for? At the Chamber, we're finding a significant need in just hand-holding people to walk through the government resource and government support systems. Folks who, sort of get paralyzed when they start to look at government forms and try to navigate the bureaucratic jungle that might exist in some of these things. And we certainly want to make sure that everybody gets all the assistance that they deserve and all the assistance that the federal and provincial governments are trying to apply here. Are you getting folks coming to you and saying, before I get to that, I need to know if you can help me with this?
Yeah, I think by and large for us, it's probably quite similar. It's, eligibility questions that are based on kind of complex personal situations and employment setups. So yeah, I think probably trying to understand the existing programs was the biggest initial area of demand. Our team has started the onboarding process on Wednesday. So I think we're still trying to fully figure out what those areas of highest need are. But yeah, I think definitely accessing the programs to begin with, and then trying to figure out cash flow is another really big need that we've been hearing, as well as some employment challenges, around, for example, does reducing someone's hours weekly from say 40 to 8, does that count as a dismissal? Like some of those complex aspects to it. And I think more than anything, what we've been getting as well is, tourism's it's a small kind of touchy-feely industry, and a lot of the businesses we work with are also our friends, and it's a lot of businesses looking for advice on what next steps they should take in their really challenging kind of personal situations where there's no standard response that will meet their need. It needs that kind of they need that one-on-one support to be able to, navigate whatever that particular challenge might be.
Graham, same as you, are you finding the needs assessment is pretty early stage stuff, or what are you getting from your initial inquiries?
Yeah, so some of the initial inquiries are based on, well, first steps to considering powering up some sort of e-commerce component to your business. You've kind of referred to it already. There's a diversity of businesses out there that have not really pursued much activity within the digital domain, but are now somewhat being forced to consider that. So we're having a lot of fairly entry-level staged questions. Now, the good thing there is that we can provide quite a bit of support for those initial questions. We're also very actively and almost daily refining resource lists that fit the businesses that are coming to us. with respect to provincial or federal programs. We all know that's a moving set of situations, and it gets a little complicated. We are not here to provide those resources per se, but we are keeping short lists to help people get to things a little faster.
Yeah, so we're finding cheat sheets really help at this point in time. So I just want to sort of return, Graham, to the types of businesses that are would be eligible for the programming and who would benefit mostly. Because what I'm really starting to get a clearer picture now of what you're going to end up doing, and you're going to end up automatically arming people for the next wave or the next pandemic or for the next big disaster, and for the, like we now understand, you know, the new reality of business that is coming at us. So don't restrict yourself to thinking about just Main Street retailers who've had to temporarily close up the brick and mortar shop, but wholesalers, agriculturalists, food businesses, farmers, et cetera, right down to artisans and makers.
100%. And so just some large numbers off the top here. Depending on how you measure it, the world's economy is between 80 and 90 trillion dollars. So world economic performance measures that way. The digital economy has been between 3 to 5 trillion. So it's still quite a small chunk of the world's global economy. But that has happened arguably over the last 20 years. So every business, every industry has been slowly but surely, and in some cases very quickly, been moving to digital commerce. And so now, you know, the Fortune 50 list, the Fortune 10 list, well, they're all digital companies. We have examples, and we've used this in just common language for all sorts of things, where all of a sudden there's a multi-billion-dollar company that moves people around called Uber, and another multi-billion-dollar company that causes some grief from time to time, Airbnb. And so when we look back at those things, you know, they were just platforms and digital capabilities serving very traditional industries in a new way. And so why the tech sector in particular and digital economy businesses have grown so fast is that they benefit from the power of what enabling technologies can do. And so now we have, you know, a world challenge where a lot of traditional physical businesses, you know, are shuttered and facing real challenges in this crisis and then transition period. And so to your point, yes, we really feel that businesses have an opportunity to diversify their revenue models, diversify how they deliver their products and services. And when things get to the new normal, you know, they could have twice the business because they now have the reach of customers above and beyond a physical traditional trade area. You know, love them or hate them, you know, Amazon.com is now a $1.2 trillion company that has benefited from doing some very basic things within consumer goods at scale. And so we're not saying that people are going to snap their fingers and be the next that, but what we are saying is that if people take time to invest in diversifying their business models and adding the power of enabling platforms and technologies, they could be better off once things get back to normal.
Really super good point. I've seen some businesses take this time that they know they're going to be shuttered for a month or two. And so they're taking this time to renovate their restaurant or, you know, redo the building and things like that. So this is kind of a digital version of that same thing. Mm-hmm. And Calum, you know, tourism as an industry was hammered really, really, really fast. I mean, inside of a week, we saw hotel properties canceling $1 million worth of business. And that's not $1 million worth of business you're going to pick up the day after the good Dr. Bonnie lets us open and operate again. That's business that's off the books for good. When Graham was speaking some numbers there, it started to sink into me. Do you know, this is kind of a two-part question. Do you know the size of the economic loss? Are there estimates out there? I'm going to ask you the question generally, then I'm going to ask you to zero in on the local economy. Because I spoke to Mayor and Council last Monday at council meeting, and I talked about the hit on Nanaimo because tourism is a big piece of our economy. So when tourism gets hit like that, our whole economy is shattered somewhat. So can you address that a little bit, Calum?
Yeah, so I'm just pulling up some numbers because I don't want to take a guess and say the wrong thing. So our really strong partners, Destination Greater Victoria, led by Paul Nursey and his team, have done some really specific research for the capital area on the island. We found through our survey work that losses right now are about $250,000 on average per business, and growing. That was pretty similar to the results that we were seeing from the survey work being done by the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, which obviously is much larger than just tourism. But for the Greater Victoria area in particular, they're expecting a $1.4 billion loss to the economy through reduced visitor spending. Wow. $605 million to $850 million in lost wages, and between 20 and 22,000 job losses, and a projected tax revenue loss of $375 million over the next 10 to 14 months. Their economic team and research team is very strong, so I have a pretty high degree of confidence in those numbers. So yeah, it's really severe. So you just think about, that's just Victoria, and no community is immune to this from a tourism and travel perspective. Those communities that rely on more long haul travel are going to be impacted more severely. And I think the reality is that our businesses now have to look at kind of pragmatic ways that they can pivot and offer some services in a way to cover at least some of their fixed costs that they can't do anything about. So that could be, changing your market, trying to attract more local and short haul domestic markets, offering completely different services with the assets that you have. But yeah, I know it's definitely going to be challenging. And I think I lost track of the second part of the question.
It was scaling down to Nanaimo specifically. Here we think tourism, we just think tourist operations, whale watching or something like that. Whereas it's a whole, it spans the industry. There's travel. Our good friends at Wilson's, dramatic losses for Wilson bus service. There's hotels, motels. There is the whale watching and charter fishing and so on and so forth. There's simply traveling through Nanaimo to get to the Tofinos and to get to the North Islands is stopped because we're trying to frown on travel to those destinations because their systems are fragile at the best of times and now would be easily hampered beyond their control.
Yeah, so I think it's very difficult here in Nanaimo. I think you've certainly heard me say that tourism has flown under the radar as an industry for too long in the city of Nanaimo. Mm-hmm. And I think in the last 4 or 5 years, tourism's really blossomed into a really serious heavyweight industry in Nanaimo, I think. And a lot of obviously that business has been lost and won't return in a meaningful way for I don't want to speculate how long, but a fairly significant period of time. So I think we're definitely going to feel some big impacts here in Nanaimo. The conversations we're having with our stakeholders at Tourism Nanaimo, there's really no other way to characterize them other than heartbreaking. It's upsetting and challenging, but also we're seeing some really cool stories of businesses that are innovating and fighting and coming up with new ways to try to adapt and survive. And maybe they can't survive for 2 years with their pivot, but it can get them through the next 6 months. It can help them cover the fixed cost of the new outboard motors they bought for their boat, or whatever that recent investment might have been. Because I think one thing that we often forget is, with tourism booming so much in the last 4 or 5 years, this past winter was a really logical time for businesses to be making serious investments in, in enhancing their services and experiences, improving their infrastructure. So a lot of our businesses are at, right now, they're typically speaking, they'd be at the lowest cash flow point in their year. They will have just spent money preparing to market for summer travel. They will have just finished making significant improvements. And then all of a sudden, all the revenues they were expected have just disappeared. And what I will say is that I don't have any specific numbers for Nanaimo offhand, but we are working with Dan Brady and the Hospitality Association to help provide some more specifics around the impact that we're seeing here in Nanaimo. But generally speaking, it's devastating for a lot of businesses.
I was on a call last week with the Economic Development Association of BC, in which somebody stated it's hard to talk about recovery when you don't know where the bottom is, because we've never drilled down this far before. And we've never seen the breadth of damage to an economy. When I think of tourism, I also think of arts and entertainment. And of course, we can't gather. We can't go out to a nightclub, or we can't go to a play. We can't go to the symphony. The Port Theatre has been shuttered since back in early March, and no sign of that opening until after May 31. Likewise, the conference center, of course, bang, shut down mid-March. Both of those are going to have a significant impact on our local economy, as both of those properties pay rent to City of Nanaimo. And that's going to be a loss for the city, as well as all the rest of the losses the city is tallying up, from loss of recreation programming to facility rentals, et cetera, et cetera. Graham, back to you for a final question.
Yeah, so let me just recap a couple of things here. So
Yes.
first of all, the impacts, the ripple effects are just beyond comprehension when you really think about it. But the challenge that I want to put out, which I think a lot of us are starting to wrap our heads around, is tied to the fact that entrepreneurs will fill any void.
Mm-hmm.
They really will. And so we have unexpected time and challenge to get really creative, to think of things that normally we just wouldn't have to think about, because it's going to happen. Entrepreneurs will fill every void. And so I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the founders of Uber were not taxi cab drivers. The founders of Airbnb didn't own a B&B. They looked at something that was 100-200 years old and said, wait a minute, I could do that differently. And they did, right? So we have a lot of traditional businesses that have done quite well for a long time, and they've really never been forced to think about doing anything differently. But guess what? Every once in a while, they get disrupted. And before this all happened, we were wrapping our heads around disruption, or the robots are coming or something. Well, okay, we're not worried about robots right now. We're worried about things that we can't even see. So my challenge to the business community is to get damn creative, like really think out of the box, like way out of the box. And we're using the term hyper local. You guys are using that too, Calum, because the solutions are hyper local. The solutions are us. Yeah, the government's going to help us out, but there's obviously limits to that. There's a little bit of complication to getting it going, and it's certainly better than nothing. And I think it's quite powerful. It's remarkable what our country is doing, but we need to tap entrepreneurial thinking and spirit like never before, and because it's going to happen. And I've got data on this all day long that's going to suggest that digital tools and platforms and services are going to be a part of it. We're going to have hybrid business models like we've never had before. And so that is the challenge. I really feel that these programs are going to help bring some creativity to the table. And I can't wait to be even more of a local tourist than I already am. And guess what? All of us need to kind of maybe consider stuff like that.
Yeah, I would agree entirely. I would agree with your statement about creativity and entrepreneurs filling a void. We see it all the time. And I think that's part of what makes this not just a scary time, but a really exciting and interesting time. Calum, pivot to you. And do you want to have any closing comments? Want to reemphasize or reinforce anything that you've stated already?
Yeah, no, just again, a huge thanks for having me on. Encourage all of you tuning in today. If you're a tourism business, please, don't hesitate to reach out. If you've come up with an innovative solution or a way that you've pivoted your business, we'd love to hear from you. If, another thing that you've heard me say more than once, Kim, is, a great place to live is a great place to visit. And I think we're seeing now more than ever how a lot of tourism businesses are stepping up and supporting their communities in pretty amazing ways. My brother's a new doctor, and he, in part because of his age and his background, is working in the COVID unit at his hospital. And the supports he's been getting from the community are just, it's pretty amazing and heartwarming. So, please share that with us, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't hesitate to reach out, bounce ideas off of our team. And, more than anything, if you think that the program can support you and your business, please register. There's lots of great support there. And if, the program's not a great fit for your business because you're not in tourism, I'm sure, all of us know folks who work in tourism or own tourism businesses, help amplify the program and share things out. And the last thing I'll say, I was on a call with Community Futures yesterday, and friend Kathy Robertson, who runs the Community Futures Cowichan, said that she was impressed that we were building the airplane while we're flying it with this program. And that's really how it feels. But we are looking for incremental ways to improve the program, and we want it to be meaningful and beneficial. So we welcome ideas, suggestions, opportunities to increase our impact, because we're building this plane while we're flying it, and we're kind of figuring things out along the way. So yeah, huge thanks, Kim. And hopefully we'll get some more businesses registered and be able to help some more folks out in the coming weeks.
Yes, I hope we can contribute to that. I love the analogy, building a plane while you're flying it. Visually, it doesn't look that great, but it does work in the head for sure. I want to thank you both. I want to especially salute to Ice-T and Lynn Robert and her team over there. The two programs that are diverse, that are targeted to different audiences and different needs, but both that sound like it couldn't be better time for it. And I really appreciate that we've got you two gentlemen and your teams in command of those two programs. So I invite anybody with even a passing interest to check in, take a look at how they may apply and what it may work for them. And if nothing more than an inquiry and a starting point, get to that keyboard and send the emails off and get the application in and see how it can help you. There's so much need in our community right now. So I'm so happy that you guys are there to help fulfill that need. This brings the today to an end. We're at 10:49, last minute of wrap up. Next week's weekend or end of week webinar, we'll be talking to the retail and service sector. Mark Fenwick, General Manager of Woodgrove, is joining us. Look forward to having Mark and a guest panelist to be identified this coming week. So everybody have a great weekend. Once again, want to acknowledge the Nova Scotia tragedy and the folks that are suffering out there. and give them a hearty Canadian hello. And thank everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.